The sun rose slowly over the hills of Galilee, bathing the mountainside in golden light. A crowd had gathered, men, women, and children, weary from the burdens of life, yet drawn by a quiet hope. They had heard of the teacher, the one who healed the sick, fed the hungry, and spoke of a kingdom not of this world. Jesus walked among them, calm, gentle, and full of compassion. His eyes met theirs, and for a moment they felt seen, truly seen. He climbed a little higher on the hill and sat down. The crowd grew silent. No scrolls, no temple walls, just open sky and beating hearts. And then he spoke, words that would echo through centuries, words that turned the world's values upside down. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. In that moment, the weary found rest. The broken found purpose. Heaven touched earth. The Beatitudes were not mere sayings. They were invitations, a roadmap to the heart of God. And those who listened that day began to realize, true blessing wasn't found in power or possessions, but in humility, mercy, and love. The mountain became a sanctuary, the wind carried his words like music, and hope began to take root in human hearts. A young man stood at the edge of the crowd. His robe was torn, his eyes hollow from hardship. He had lost his land, his dignity, and his hope. When Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," and that something stirred inside him. How could poverty of spirit be a blessing? He had always been told that blessing meant wealth, status, and success. Yet here was this teacher saying that the truly blessed are those who know they have nothing and depend wholly on God. The young man closed his eyes and felt the weight of his failures, his fears, his emptiness. But instead of despair, a strange peace began to rise. For the first time, he didn't feel like he had to be enough. He only needed to come as he was. In that humility, he sensed something sacred. The kingdom of heaven was not far away. It was near, even within. Jesus' words weren't condemning the strong, but lifting the broken. He was saying that when we come to the end of ourselves, God begins his work in us. The young man looked up. The mountain air felt lighter, freer. Maybe, just maybe, being poor in spirit wasn't the end, but the beginning. Further down the hill, a widow clutched the hand of her only son. She had buried her husband months before and had forgotten how to smile. Life had become a string of silent prayers and sleepless nights. When Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted," tears filled her eyes. Could mourning truly be blessed? She had felt forgotten, but in that moment, she realized that God was not distant from her grief. He was near, nearer than her breath. Jesus wasn't saying that sorrow was good, but that it could become sacred when surrendered to God. Her tears, once bitter, became a prayer of release. In that surrender, comfort came, not from words, but from his presence. The widow later said, "When he spoke, my pain didn't vanish, but my heart began to heal." That is the mystery of divine comfort. It doesn't erase sorrow, it transforms it. Every tear becomes a seed, and from the soil of pain, compassion grows. In a world ruled by pride and power, meekness sounds weak. Yet Jesus declared, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Among the crowd stood a soldier, strong, disciplined, weary of violence. He had seen kingdoms rise and fall, and he knew that no sword could bring peace. When Jesus spoke of meekness, he listened. Meekness is not weakness, it's strength under control. It's the power to be right, yet choose peace. It's the courage to yield, the wisdom to wait, the grace to forgive. The soldier loosened his grip on his weapon. He realized that true strength was not in domination, but in gentleness. The meek inherit the earth, not through conquest, but through compassion. As he walked home, the world seemed softer. The earth, once a battlefield, became holy ground. In that moment, he understood meekness was not losing power. It was transforming it through love. A young woman in the crowd had spent her life searching for meaning. She chased success, relationships, and even religion. Yet something was always missing. When Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled," her heart skipped. She realized her hunger wasn't for comfort or approval. It was for something deeper, the rightness of God's way. Righteousness was not self-perfection. It was right relationship, with God, with others, and with her own soul. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Lord, make me right with you." And in that moment, she felt full, not because she had achieved something, but because she had received grace. Those who hunger for righteousness don't settle for easy answers. They long for a world made whole, for justice, mercy, and truth to reign. That hunger is holy, and Jesus promises it will be satisfied. Mercy is a strange kind of strength. It bends without breaking, forgives without forgetting. A tax collector stood at the edge of the crowd, despised by his own people, hated for his greed. But when Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy," his heart trembled. He had shown no mercy in his work. He had taken what wasn't his. Yet here was an invitation, a chance to begin again. Mercy flows both ways. To receive it, we must give it. The tax collector went home and began returning what he had taken. Each act of kindness healed a little more of his shame. And he learned this: mercy doesn't erase justice, it redeems it. It's not weakness, it's the deepest expression of love. In forgiving others, we find freedom, and in showing mercy, we discover the heart of God himself. Purity isn't about perfection, it's about focus. A heart undivided, a love unmixed. Among the listeners was a Pharisee, a man known for his religious discipline. But even he felt something stir when Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." He had memorized scripture, obeyed the law, and lived with outward holiness. Yet he knew his heart was cluttered with pride. Purity, he realized, wasn't about ritual. It was about relationship. It meant removing the noise so that God's voice could be heard. He walked away humbled, whispering, "Lord, create in me a clean heart." And for the first time he began to see, not with his eyes, but with his spirit. The pure in heart see God not because he hides, but because everything else no longer blocks the view. War had left scars on the land and on hearts. Yet Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of love in the midst of it. A mother who had lost 2 sons to violence heard those words and wept. Could peace still be possible? She chose to forgive the one who had caused her pain. Her village called her foolish. But in her act of forgiveness, hearts began to change. True peacemakers don't just stop fights, they restore relationships. They carry the heart of the Father, who makes peace through love. And as the mother watched 2 former enemies embrace, she understood, peacemaking is holy work. It's not easy, but it's divine. The crowd grew uneasy when Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Blessed? In suffering, many didn't understand, but those who followed him later would. Years later, one of his disciples sat in prison, chains on his wrists, yet joy in his heart. He remembered that day on the mountain. He remembered the words of blessing, and he smiled. Persecution tests what comfort cannot. It refines faith until it shines. The disciple wrote to his brothers and sisters, "Rejoice when you suffer for his name." Because the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who stand firm, even when the world stands against them. The Beatitudes weren't promises of an easy life, but of a meaningful one. As the crowd began to disperse, the mountain was quiet again. But the words of Jesus lingered in the air. The Beatitudes had painted a picture of a different kind of kingdom. A kingdom where the poor are rich, the mourners are comforted, the meek are strong, and the merciful are honored. A kingdom not of pride and power, but of love and humility. Years later, those same words would shape civilizations, inspire martyrs, and comfort millions. Because the Beatitudes were not just teachings, they were a portrait of the King himself. Jesus lived every word he spoke. He was poor in spirit, yet full of heaven. He mourned with the broken, yet brought comfort. He was meek, merciful, pure, and peace-bringing. And though he was persecuted, he never stopped loving. The mountain that day was not just a place of teaching, it was a revelation. A whisper from eternity saying, "This is the way of blessing. This is the heart of God."